Hello and welcome back to RageGamingVideos and more Diablo 4 and more Vessel of Hatred talk. Now the embargo has lifted on the review version of the game. A bunch of people were able to play it early, test stuff, in a kind of limited amount of time. Myself, Cotton and Josh were all in this review build. With that we have loads of information to do with the classes, their builds, how they're kind of functioning in the new DLC, to advise and kind of just talk to you about before you go in yourself. So if we're going to talk about what's the best build for each of the classes, what actually makes a good build in this DLC? Well, it's the ability to enter the hardest difficulty mode in endgame, which is Torment level 4, and then, of course, perform effectively. That means pit level 65 to unlock it, and then how high in the rankings can it get? We're seeing most of the classes at very least have the ability to get to say 80 okay, but the top contenders are obviously pushing higher to full 100. We'll explain stuff as we go, but let's start with the new one, Spiritborn, which is the most up in the air class because yes, it's new, and every main build needs to be ironed out and tested and compared. Not just that, but compared to the other classes, which, you know, they've all had history to draw on, the last season of how they performed there, and even the recent PTR. With Spiritborn, it's just been this review build under those time restrictions and a very limited player base to work that compared to live. But even so, we have great information from the review build. It was easily the most popular class being tested, and not to mention, we had Cotton testing it for us. Now, it seems very likely the best options are going to revolve around either the unyielding hits legendary aspect, which converts armor value into raw weapon damage increases, and it even works past armor cap, or stuff like the mystic circles, something you activate with different aspects, like Plane's power that makes the circles give a damage boost per ferocity stack that you have. There's also hope for some Thorn stuff, which has proven pretty incredible, but we're going to talk mostly about the Quill Volley Eagle build, and for poison builds too, with that new mythic unique polearm weapon. So to cut to the chase then, we think the top two are going to be around either Quill Volley or Touch of Death. Both are going to make use of unyielding hits, the aspect that gives you that % armor added to your weapon damage. They'll also both use the Rod of Kepaleke, a unique which turns core skills into basics and makes them only cost resource if you have max. That's essentially turning into guaranteed crit then, with bonus crit damage per point of resource spent. A super high multiplier which scales the damage to comical levels, as we're going to see. There's also the Ring of Midnight Sun, which refunds half the resource spent in the last 2 seconds whenever you crit for obvious synergy, and Harmony of Ibukawa. That provides a lot of bonus damage because Gorilla and Jaguar Spirit Hole are the best choices for that class mechanic. There's also the most popular and strong key passive, which would be Prodigy's Tempo. It makes every third consecutive basic skill simply increase all skill ranks, which is massive, but also every third consecutive core skill will reduce all active cooldowns. So with the rod in mind, this applies both bonuses to Quill Volley and Touch of Death. It's clear, very high value for either one. Which one will come out on top is the debate right now. We do think Touch of Death is probably the more interesting one overall, maybe the higher cap option since it's a poison build. But since it uses a specific aspect to make it turn that poison dot into instead direct damage, that makes it work in this concept, but seemingly has a lot more gear requirements to really reach its highest potential. Either way, between Quill Volley and Touch of Death, both of them seem to be outperforming everyone else for clear times and general output. We are currently thinking Spiritborn is going to be the king of Season 6, at least initially with that in mind. So expect to see a lot of videos about Quill Volley and Touch of Death. Let's move on to the class that I've been playing mostly in the review build, and that is Rogue. This is a pretty straightforward answer, but it's a bit of a weird one. They introduced this new skill, Dance of Knives, which allows you to become kind of a whirlwind barbarian with lots of perks to it beyond what we see with whirlwind these days. In the PTR, the top build was around Dance of Knives combined with Victimize. That again is going to be a top contender, a clear top contender, if not the best build initially. If it isn't Dance of Knives, it's going to be Victimize and basically about proccing that effect as fast and as many times as possible. Other options that are going to be able to do this many hit concept fast to proc Victimize, that's going to be things like Rapid Fire obviously and the classic Barrage, but honestly there's going to be other options for this too, like Flurry and Twisting Blades might come back. The only real concern for Dance of Knives not being like the top way to proc that is the way that you're not able to really control the location of Dance of Knives. You just throw them out and they hit enemies. Sometimes that can be awkward if you're not able to get through the pack to say a shielded enemy or something like that, where with other abilities like Rapid Fire, you could hit that specific enemy. However, with the way Dance of Knives allows you to permanently move, allowing you to be very evasive and play medium to close range, you can evade a lot of damage that way. The thing is, there's been some very impactful changes that has changed the way that Victimize feels and works that feels a bit wonky. It's very comparable to the Barber Heart in Season 1. The idea is that you're going to proc Victimize, and then it's going to have an internal cooldown that we can do nothing about, kind of storing up damage before the next burst after a delay, which you might compare to the Barber Heart in Season 1. The issue with that, again, is that you can't really decide where that burst of damage is going to land, and again, that internal cooldown between each burst makes things a bit awkward for that purpose. So yeah, we do think Victimize is going to be the core of any best build, at least initially for Season 6, as our best source of damage for Rogue. But yes, it does feel very clunky, as you're going to find out, that delayed damage and the inability to control it fully. This is going to be tied to the classic concept of mixing poison and freeze. There are many aspects that enhance your damage by combining poison and chill specifically, and all the benefits of dazing and stunning enemies via freeze and so on. So familiar concepts to what we saw in the end of Season 5, and then what we specifically played in the PTR with Dance of Knives. It just works a bit different, feels a bit more clunky, but is still undeniably strong, and I think Victimize is going to be the key to all of the best builds. Next up then, it's time to talk Sorcerer. Back in Season 5, the splintering energy aspect was the only meaningful, infinitely scaling way to deal damage. So it eventually became the best build by a long shot. Infinite lightning spears sent out, leading to, maximum output. Now it's been nerfed, so not only does it damage less often, but there's a cap on the amount of spears you can have, which I believe is 12. Just like what we saw with Rogue and the chance to throw out multiple Dance of Knives on a proc, the whole spawn 2 spears at once, that tempo was replaced with double damage on Lightning Spear, which isn't what you were looking for. You want volume, not the raw damage on the spear itself. So it's definitely taken a relevant hit in multiple ways. So Lightning Spear, pure Lightning Spear, just isn't what it once was. But what's interesting is the fact that it's way less in front of the other builds now. It's still the only way to infinitely scale damage. It seems like it's still going to be the best way to get maximum output despite all the nerfs. There's expected to be a lot of discussion then about how to maximize this kind of damage. If the cap is 12 and you can get 12 Lightning Spears out while not being in a pure Lightning Spear build, then that's a big deal. So discussions around Chain Lightning via Unstable Currents and Frozen Orb with Shattered Winterglass could be two kind of core builds that get these Lightning Spears out to their max cap anyway as top performers. You're like playing a quote-unquote normal build that also still summons the Lightning Spears with the splintering energy. There are some really interesting stuff in the patch notes that we want to test and look into though. Josh was telling me about the insane change to the elemental constellation aspect. The buff was 1050% weapon damage. Is indeed real and not a typo. That was confirmed. So if that turns out to be the new kind of random sorcerer aspect that's so overtuned that it blows everything out of the water compared to that, that could also be a consideration. Basically, it seems like Sorcerer's ceiling is going to be a lot lower with these caps in place for Lightning Spear. But with the way that you're able to get kind of the Lightning Spear effect into all the core builds, it should open up different build playstyles and options, resulting in a healthier state for the class. He still has a lot of issues with the problems of the class in general, like the enchantment system. He says that they're still shackled to Firebolt as an enchantment, which means most builds are going to have to still be burning stuff for both damage and the survivability this provides. But still, there's only so many enchants that are relevant anyway. They need some attention. Where it's going to place overall meta power level though, we're going to have to see. Next up then, that brings us to Necromancer, which is in an interesting state. The top build from the PTR is likely still to be the best build overall after the review build. That is Blood Spirit, as they're calling it, a mix of Blood Wave and Bone Spirit. There's the classic unique chest that when you pick up Blood Orbs will spawn a Bone Spirit. With various changes to Blood Wave then, it's pretty exciting. Blood Wave used to slow enemies, now it just provides you a 20% damage reduction for 10 seconds. But in relation to the unique chest, Blood Orbs spawned from each Blood Wave has gone up from 3 to 6. So by just pressing that ultimate, you're going to be spawning a ton of them. Which means, yes, Blood Wave is not just going to be a good ultimate skill. Finally, it's arguably, I would say definitely the best. Combine that with the tidal aspect then. Additional Blood Waves now deal 100 to 120% of normal damage instead of their previous pathetic damage of 50 to 30% reduced damage. You're able to get a lot more Blood Waves out that are dealing relevant damage. And then you collect all of the many Blood Orbs you've just spawned by sending out Blood Lances using the aspect of Gorquills. This will then proc that unique chest, the Blood Artisan's Caress, spamming out the Bone Spirits, which is this like Blood Spirit concept. There are many ways to help maintain your ultimate cooldown. The Fast Blood aspect is an easy one to call out. So essentially you're just spamming out Blood Wave whenever you can, popping all of the orbs with Bloodlands, and letting Bone Spirits just crush everything that's still surviving if anything is. With this kind of build then, you should be having a lot of health health to stay healthy, fortification, and damage reduction through that, resulting in a pretty good survivability build. And so, yeah, we're still thinking that it's going to be your top pick. Now, obviously, I do want to at least mention the other things. Minion Necromancer has got some real attention, but from what we've seen, it's still going to face serious issues in Torment 4, you know, the real endgame. There's been a lot of discussion and testing in the PTR with the whole overpower soul rift concept. That's still very promising. And you know, just going straight Bone Spirit and the insane scaling that has, as much as I personally am not into that build, at ultra geared status later in the season, we're going to have to see how competitive that is, because it still could be. So Necromancer does have a variety of relevant options, and some of them are a lot more interesting and new. So in terms of variety, Necromancer does have some options. We'll just see how it plays out meta competitive wise. Right, that brings us to Druid then, which is in a pretty sad state in my opinion. In the PTR, you saw some awesome stuff like the Shout Druid, which is just a comical concept. Pressing one button over and over and over, that would reset its own cooldowns because of Bold Chieftain, and they nerfed it. They made Bold Chieftain reduce percent cooldown instead of flat seconds. So you can't spam the core ability of the build anymore. I don't know if that's exactly killed it, but it's definitely not going to be remotely best anymore. If you look back at Season 5 then and that best build, the Storm Slide build, a mix of your storms and lightning strikes, and then of course the whole landslide and earthquake concept. Super fun, really synergetic build. By sending out the landslides and generating those earthquakes, you would proc your lightning storm stuff. And then by doing your lightning storm stuff, you would proc the earthquakes and landslide stuff. You're like this elemental druid more than you are like a transforming bear druid or wolverine bear or whatever. Very unique, very cool, very shamanistic. Kind of like Spiritborn in concept. So they've mechanically changed that to essentially not work anymore. And what I've seen from druids in regards to this with the review build and the discussion is just kind of confused disappointment. Something that was really strong and really fun. So yeah, I don't understand it either. It wasn't like it was overly strong to the point that no other class could compete with it. It was just solid with good results overall. This leaves druid with that question of like, okay, well if these things don't work anymore, what do I do instead? Well, from what I've seen, pure landslide was performing solidly in the PTR without relying on any bugs. Since in the patch notes I've not seen anything that would concern me with pure landslide build, of druid's generally messy options after what feels like mostly negative changes. And reports that I've seen on the review build where it's functioning well enough in Torment 4, I think maybe pure landslide is the only or best option to go with to begin with. But yeah, it leaves me in a very strange, confused state. Why dismantle builds that aren't overly strong but feel and work well? That brings me to Barbarian, where I am genuinely lost. Something that is crazy to me is the fact that the Barbarian kind of creators and press and people that normally test that, the ones that I've seen in the review build, they're not playing Barbarian. They're all playing Spiritborn. The only few that I've seen that haven't completely dropped Barbarian are playing Spiritborn and a little bit of Barbarian. So unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you. Barbarian was essentially king of the first year of this game. It wasn't until the last season where they finally fell and fell a little bit too far as kind of the worst class of the season. In the PTR, that changed. There was this ridiculous bug with a new barbed carapace key passive they got and tough as nail ranks on your gear. This allowed them to double dip, resulting in ridiculous amounts of thorns being generated. So the whole concept of reflecting damage became one of the best things in the PTR overall, not just for Barbarian specifically. So thorns builds became like the shining beacon of hope for barbs again in Season 6 in this DLC. Guess what? It was a bug and they fixed it, specifically saying that it did result in extreme amounts of thorns being granted, and so they've simply removed that. That leaves me with a big question of like, okay, well what are they meant to play? And with all the Barbarian players playing Spiritborn, and a shockingly low amount of discussion in the Barbarian chat, I must say, I can't pretend to tell you like this is going to be the best build. Barbarian is most up in the air out of all the classes right now, at least from my point of view right at the second. Having said that, there's been some fun discussions around Thorns and Mighty Throw in regards to leveling builds and hopefully scaling that into the endgame. So if I had to pick one build that has a bit of hope, Mighty Throw would be it. But yeah, dire state for Barbarians right now. If you guys have any advice on Barbarians as a topic, please let us know in the comments. But yeah, there's my overview of everything we've seen from Season 5's end, the PTR, and now the review stuff. Spiritborn, in my opinion, is looking to be the strongest class in the game, with hopefully a good showing from a bit of a buggy, victimized rogue, the new, more varied playstyles for Sorcerer, some cool new builds for Necromancer, and we'll see how Druid and especially Barbarian actually end up. For now then, I hope this was interesting or useful to you. I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.